Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch president, here with our weekly update on social media. Thanks for joining us today. Judicial Watch is your watchdog in Washington. There's a lot going on, as always. I have some new information on taxpayer funding for the Soros operations, new developments in the Mueller operation, and questions about how it was authorized and whether it has any authorization under law. And of course, we've got the border crisis and that caravan at issue now. National Guard troops sent to the border and new developments there. And Judicial Watch, as always, has been right in the middle of this issue, and I'll brief you on that. And then there's this new information out about a scandal that's a big scandal that you probably haven't heard much about, which is the Juan Brothers, a scandal that's implicated dozens of Democrats on Capitol Hill. And I'll brief you on that. Again, Judicial Watch right in the thick of that. First up, though, are new developments in our investigation into Soros world. Judicial Watch, as I discussed recently, has numerous federal lawsuits trying to figure out the extent of taxpayer support, particularly under the Obama administration, for the Soros open society organizations, especially their activities abroad. We've sued the State Department and USAID, which is a funder of supposedly groups that better civil society in other countries. And of course, they're giving money to the Soros operations. We've investigated Albania, Macedonia, Romania, Colombia, and Guatemala. And we filed 4 lawsuits related to State Department funding for Soros's radical agenda. And one of those lawsuits struck pay dirt, which is the lawsuit over its activities in Albania. Albania is controlled by a left-wing communist government. There's really no other way to describe it. So of course the Soros organizations are supportive of this government. And your tax dollars are going to bolster its efforts to consolidate power. Specifically, $9 million in taxpayer money, our documents that we uncovered as a result of the lawsuit show, were sent to Soros by the Obama administration in 2016. Specifically, the USAID funneled money through the agency's Civil Society Project to the foundations, the Soros Foundations groups in Albania. It's called a Justice for All campaign, which was overseen by Soros's East-West Management Institute. So what was going on is the judiciary was a little too independent for the leftists in power, and they wanted to push an effort to, quote, reform the judiciary, meaning bring it back under control of the leftist authoritarians running Albania. So Soros was on the side, unfortunately, of the authoritarians, and our tax dollars were being used to subsidize this effort. And some senators have highlighted this. Senator Mike Lee, particularly from Utah, has taken a leadership role in highlighting the open society taxpayer-funded efforts in Albania and elsewhere. And not only that, but a U.S. ambassador, Donald Liu, a holdover from the Obama administration, has also been supportive of the radical government in Albania. So you've got our money, tax dollars, going into this effort by Soros operations to suppress freedom in Albania. And on top of that, you also had, according to these documents, the State Department letting the Soros open society groups come into the State Department and help vet, or quote, provide technical reviews of other grant applications. So not only were they taking our money and spending it, but also telling and helping the government decide how else to spend our money. Now, I don't need to tell you that George Soros is a billionaire, and I hope I don't need to tell you that it's probably not a good use of taxpayer dollars to provide subsidies to a billionaire, especially one that wants to advance this agenda that's so at odds with freedom and Western values. If you don't like also what Soros is doing here at home, why on earth would you want to support what he's doing abroad? And of course, this is not done with any, quote, congressional approval, more or less. I mean, they kind of acquiesce because they don't, other than a few senators, don't do much to stop it once they find out it's happening. But this is the sort of the deep state funding the Soros operations. And it was happening, obviously, during the Obama administration, as I'm talking about, but we found that this partnership continued into the Trump administration, the deep state really sticking it to Donald Trump. And they were partnering with Soros' operations in Albania, taking our U.S. Embassy, partnering with the Soros operation to take surveys of the population to figure out their support for this judicial takeover they were proposing. And their survey results showed that 91% of the Albanian people supported this takeover. Look, any poll that gives you a 91% result, especially a poll that gives you a 91% result in the area you want to get, is it worth the paper it's written on? And it just shows you that this is propaganda and a push poll, to put it charitably, funded again with your tax dollars in partnership with the Soros operations. And I know this isn't just happening in Albania. I know it's happening in other places like Macedonia, Romania, Hungary, and in Central, and I'm sure in South America. The Soros operation, $9 million may not seem like a lot in terms of government spending, but it's certainly a lot in a country like Albania. And these groups have outsized influence, not only because of the money they have and the big footprint they're able to make as a result of the money that isn't available to others. It's because they have the support of the U.S. State Department and the USAID community there on the ground in Albania. The U.S. ambassador in these smaller countries is an extraordinarily powerful figure, and he can make or break politicians and governments. So when you have a Soros ally in positions of ambassadorships or in key positions in our embassies and consulates abroad, it really has a negative impact on our values. So I want you to, again, go to our website at judicialwatch.org. You can look at the documents yourselves, and you should be asking your members of Congress and senators, what are they going to do to stop the funding for George Soros? And ask the administration, is this still going on? Are you still working with these Soros front groups? It's funny, President Trump was criticizing Bezos, I forget his first name, but the owner of Amazon. And my view is Soros is much more important than Bezos. Because Soros has a much greater impact on our public policy with his funding here at home and his charitable operations abroad. And he has a right as a citizen to participate in our nation's public life here at home, but he doesn't have a right to our tax dollars. And this is what's objectionable to it. And you can bet no one would ever really want to approve this outright. This is why it's important for you to pressure your members of Congress, A, to find out about what's going on, and B, stop it. And if they don't know what's happening, tell them to talk to Judicial Watch and we'll tell them what's happening. Because it seems we're doing the job of Congress that they really don't feel like doing. And this is just one lawsuit. We have 3 others currently pending. We just filed 2 recently. And we have many Freedom of Information Act lawsuits that are also looking into this issue as well. So George Soros is an important guy. I don't want to overstate his importance, but I don't want to understate the impact he's having here on so many public policy values debates, whether it be election integrity, border security, you name it. Every hot button left-wing issue, his heavily funded groups are participating in here. And unlike conservative groups and traditional conservative groups, both here and abroad, they aren't getting government money the way Soros' operation is. So let's even the playing field a little bit by getting the government out of the business of subsidizing George Soros. So, there's lots of scandals going on here in Washington, D.C., and you can leave it up to Judicial Watch to find out scandals that the media won't tell you about, like taxpayer funding for George Soros. Now that I mention it, there's probably taxpayer funding for all sorts of left-wing billionaires. Maybe we should start a whole program to see maybe what Bill Gates is getting and maybe Bezos is getting for his charitable efforts, using his charitable efforts as a way I mean, if Soros is doing this, you can bet others are doing it, are using their charitable efforts as a way to suction government money, your tax dollars, to advance their agendas. So the other scandal is Robert Mueller and the special counsel operation generally. And the more we learn, the more concerned we should be about how that operation was set up. And I have an opinion editorial, an op-ed today at foxnews.com. Maybe we can provide a link in our feed here. And the title of the op-ed is Mueller's Russia probe is out of control. It's long been out of control. But when you find out what's going on now, you're just not going to believe it. So what happened is, a few weeks ago, Paul Manafort, who was President Trump's former campaign chairman for a period of time, and then he was targeted by the Obama administration and then Robert Mueller by virtue of his position, not by virtue of his criminality. It's not to say he's not a crook, but he's not the sort of crook who would have gotten the attention of the federal government but for his relation to President Trump. So Manafort a few weeks ago challenged the authority of Robert Mueller to investigate and indict him. And generally speaking, Manafort was making the allegation that, look, you were hired to investigate Russia collusion, and you're targeting me on something that has nothing to do with Russia collusion. You're targeting me on my communications with Ukrainians, the Ukrainian government, and work for that government, and tax fraud, and all sorts of other things that are unrelated to Russia collusion. And unless you were specifically charged and given the authority to investigate this, the court shouldn't allow it to proceed. Now, what's interesting is, in response, just the other day, Robert Mueller filed something which is really quite extraordinary. And it's an August 2nd memorandum, August 2nd, 2017 memorandum, written purportedly by Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General who appointed Mueller because Sessions recused himself, saying that, yeah, this is, you have authority to investigate the Ukrainian issue. And in fact, the document suggests it was part of your original jurisdiction. Well, listen to that news. And the document, by the way, is heavily redacted, so there's only portions of it. Well, it wasn't part of Mueller's original jurisdiction, because when you look at the appointing memorandum by Rod Rosenstein in May, he writes, look, you can investigate any links and/or coordination between the Russia government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and any other matters within the scope of, and he cites the regulation, basically that refers back to the original jurisdiction. So meaning you can investigate Russia's collusion, anything that pops up that's kind of related to the Russia collusion, meaning if someone lies to you as you're investigating it, you could probably do something there, and other things that you find that relate to Russia collusion that isn't necessarily covered by the first paragraph. Now, an honest prosecutor would read that as a restriction, not as a broad mandate to investigate every communication every Trump advisor had with any foreign government. But that's the way that Robert Mueller's now read it. And he's been given a CYA memo, this August 2nd memo by Rod Rosenstein. So there's nothing in there that talks about Ukraine. And this memo, which was written on August 2nd, 2017, came 6 days after the July 26th pre-dawn raid on Manafort's home. Remember, the agents went in there with guns drawn to raid Manafort's home? He and his wife were woken out of bed. And reportedly, the agents, while they were there, were taking pictures of his suits. Manafort's suits, yes, they were taking pictures of his suits. Because as you know, Russia collusion means we got to investigate whether Paul Manafort was spending too much money on suits given his income. You think I'm joking? No, I'm not joking. Go ahead and read the indictments. They talk about how much money he spends on clothes. This is the absurdity of the Mueller investigation. Now, if Mueller had come up across, now supposedly the government knew about what this Ukrainian issue with Manafort back in 2016. So it wasn't as if it wasn't on the radar of the Justice Department when they appointed Mueller, but it wasn't put in there in that appointment document. So Mueller goes ahead, raids Manafort's home, and then later gets authorization to investigate the underlying crimes over which he raided his home. How does that work? It just goes to show that this Justice Department is willing to throw the rule of law out the window when it comes to protecting Mueller's investigation. It's like he's king of the Justice Department. If he wanted to investigate the Ukrainian issue, he comes in, he's there for 10 weeks before he gets this memo. Before he did anything, he should have gone to Rod Rosenstein and said, look, you already know about this Ukrainian issue. It looks like it's kind of the same issue of Russia collusion, and he's the former Trump campaign chair. I should probably be looking at this. And Rosenstein could have said, okay, but they didn't do that. They did an after-the-fact memo, which to me is inimical to the rule of law. And again, it highlights the constitutional infirmities of the special counsel operation. And this isn't about Robert Mueller, whether he's a good or bad guy. I've long said you could have Mother Teresa running the special counsel office and it would still mow down everyone in Washington, D.C. Because the whole process is constitutionally screwed up. He gets no day-to-day supervision, practically speaking, from a constitutional officer or someone who's accountable or appointed to those who are constitutional officers, meaning someone appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. So in this case, he was doing an investigation and Rosenstein blesses it after the fact. That's not the way the Justice Department is supposed to work. And it leads into the situation where Mueller is now investigating the Ukraine, the Seychelles. He's discussing, looking into supposedly UAE communications with the Trump people. And he's now deep sea fishing among Paul Manafort's dress suits. I said it once and I'll say it again, shut it down. And we're not just fulminating about the Mueller operation here at Judicial Watch. We're in court asking the tough questions. Another development this week is there's a new book out. I don't even know the title of the book, but it makes the allegation, which I think has been out there for a little bit, but it firms it up, that John Brennan, I think it's John Brennan, right? Brennan, the CIA director under Barack Obama, radical leftist. He supposedly took that Clinton DNC dossier and laundered it through Harry Reid to get it out in the public. Talk about corrupt. Now, I want you to recall, that dossier was considered to be classified. The Clinton DNC dossier was classified. I don't think correctly so, but they were using it as a classified document. In fact, they refused to confirm or deny it even existed to Judicial Watch until recently because it was so supposedly classified. So it comes out the CIA director was maybe in violation of the law this week. And then Catherine Herridge of Fox News reported this week that Andrew McCabe, that Judicial Watch exposed, as having conflicts of interest as a result of money he was getting, or his wife had gotten, from the Clinton cash machine in Virginia to help her campaign for public office, had lied. Catherine got the specific details of the lies he told, or quote, the lack of candor he had with respect to his communications with the media about the Clinton investigations. So we have all that going on, right? And what's Mueller doing? He's talking about the Ukraine and Paul Manafort. Talk about irrelevancies. The scandal of 2016 and 17 are the abuses of power targeting Donald Trump, and the special counsel is an element of that, frankly. And this is what's so frustrating about the Justice Department's refusal to directly take on these violations of law and abuses within their own ranks, the FBI and Justice Department. Whether it be through prosecutions or special counsels, or at least reassure us that they're looking at it directly, as opposed to saying, we have investigations going on, but we can't tell you what we're looking at, as if any of that is a state secret. So Judicial Watch is asking for McCabe documents, his text messages, his communications. We're asking for the struck page text messages, Comey materials, all of his documents. Mueller's budget. He had a proposed budget. They don't want to tell us what his budget is. As I said before, we have over 30 lawsuits into this deep state attack and abuse of power, targeting President Trump and our Republican form of government. You know, all you lefties out there who, and righties, some of you, who don't like President Trump, I'm not here to convince you to like him or to support his policies. I'm here to convince you that unlawful attacks on the president who was elected by the American people can't be tolerated in a constitutional republic. And we need someone to push back and highlight what's going on and try to stop it if possible. Today is President Trump, tomorrow could be Bernie Sanders. Who knows? So it's one crisis after another here in these United States. We've got the border crisis. You had this left-wing group try to create a crisis and manufacture a crisis, which they did a good job of because they got the attention of the President of the United States by having a caravan of wannabe illegal aliens travel through Mexico from Central America, and they were going to hit the border. Now, I don't know if they've been delayed or waylaid or the Mexicans intervened that stopped them from happening. The media is providing mixed reporting on that. But it's a good indication of the crisis we face on the border. Discussions of amnesty have encouraged increased immigration, illegal immigration. We still don't have the border secure. We have all these sanctuary policies in cities and states. They're encouraging more illegal immigration because what happens is, if you're an illegal immigrant, you think, well, all I need to do is get across the border, and then I'm free and clear, because places like San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, Atlanta, you name it, they'll provide me sanctuary and help me escape the rule of law from federal immigration authorities. And of course, you've had the abuses of power under the Obama administration that has encouraged illegal immigration with this dreamer amnesty, with this providing bus tickets to anyone who got to the border as opposed to turning them back. They bring them into the interior by allowing abuses of the asylum process. You know, Judicial Watch, if you follow Judicial Watch over the years, you know that Judicial Watch has been has been instrumental in educating the American people and Washington, D.C. about the truth on the border. We've got the human trafficking crisis, we've got the drug crisis, and we have a national security crisis. And our reporting has repeatedly affirmed that we face a significant terrorist threat as a result of an unsecure border. I have a fun fact for you. General Kelly, the President Trump's chief of staff, I think he's a 4-star Marine general. And he used to run the Southern Command, which is basically the Homeland Command for our military. And I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, essentially, an unsecure border is an existential threat to the United States. So in my view, a wall may be necessary, but it isn't sufficient, and we can't wait for a wall. And I would deploy the military to the border to secure the border. And don't you believe all this, all of this concern about the Posse Comitatus Act? This has nothing to do with civil law enforcement. Posse Comitatus prevents the military, more or less, except in, with exceptions, from participating in civilian law enforcement. Well, we're asking them to secure the border. And sure enough, President Trump authorized just this week the National Guard to go down and help secure the border. You know, this caravan was like waving a red flag in front of Trump, and he responded with a rule of law approach, which is good. And just as I'm coming on today, I see General Sessions announced that the Justice Department will take a zero-tolerance approach to those who try to cross the border illegally in the southern part of the United States, the southern border, which is another fantastic development. Look, I criticize Jeff Sessions when he does the wrong thing, but when he does the right thing, he deserves praise here. And he's very good on these border security issues. There's more to be done, though. So I talked about the asylum seekers. And what happens is here, once you get to the border, at least under the Obama administration, they let you in no matter what. And all you needed to say was, I'm seeking asylum. And they'd say, all right, well, fill out this form. We'll set a hearing date, show up, and we'll adjudicate it. Well, guess what? No one really shows up for those asylum hearings. So essentially, it's a get into the United States free card. Now, my understanding of the law, now I'm not a lawyer, but I have a reasonably good understanding of immigration policies and procedures, is that if you come with a minor, or you are an unaccompanied minor, and you're not from Mexico, they kind of have to let you in and get the process going. But if you're from Mexico, you can be turned away. And if you're not from Mexico, if they had the resources at the border, they could almost immediately adjudicate your claim of asylum and then turn you away. Frankly, I believe pretty much everyone can be turned away, but I'm just presuming some have to get through. The best policy would be at the border. You want to come in and you claim asylum? Our consulate is down the road in Mexico. You can seek asylum there, and you can wait out the process in Mexico, if Mexico will let you. These asylum claims have doubled under the Obama administration, and it wasn't because there were more people who needed asylum. It's because Obama changed the rules in a way to encourage more abuses of the asylum process. So President Trump should understand he doesn't need to change the laws. He needs to enforce the ones that are in place, and he needs to let his agencies know he knows what's going on, and he expects them to provide a surge of law enforcement to the border, both from DHS, DOJ, as Sessions has kind of highlighted, he's directed his U.S. attorneys to prosecute more. So it's a crisis at the border. And just because the media doesn't want to report on it, it's still happening. Tens of thousands of people cross the border illegally, hundreds of thousands maybe every year, and that's necessarily a crisis. And it's a dire threat to our system of government and our safety. And it's about time people here in Washington, D.C. start protecting this country. And I'm glad to see the Trump administration at least taking steps in that regard. And given the way prior administrations, both Republican and Democrat, have behaved, they're dramatic steps and almost revolutionary. But they're modest nevertheless. But anything is better than nothing. And so Judicial Watch will continue to, again, tell you what's going on the border. We have our investigative staff, we have our Freedom of Information Act requests, and of course we're challenging these sanctuary cities which are so dangerous, deadly, and illegal. We have a lawsuit against San Francisco's sanctuary policy, which is now proceeding. And that would end the policy if we won that lawsuit. We wouldn't just cut off funding for San Francisco, we'd stop the policy. That's why the lawsuit's important. So we're in the middle of it, and we consider this to be a big issue. We were fighting it before Trump became president. We fought during the Obama administration. We even fought through the George W. Bush administration, because they were disastrous on immigration policy, more than less. So Another scandal, the other scandal I want to talk to you about. The Juan Brothers, essentially a criminal gang that was working for Democrats on the Hill in the House of Representatives, connected to Pakistan, that despite warnings from their own internal IG, were allowed to continue to conduct their criminal behavior. In fact, the ringleader, the Juan Brother ringleader, was left in position to cause even more damage by Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who employed him, even after he ran into law enforcement problems. There were indications they were logging on, hacking democratic systems, taking information off of democratic systems in the Hill. They had access to all sorts of information, including the members on the intelligence committees and other sensitive committees. They were stealing equipment. They maybe had access to your personal information. Just think, a lot of members of Congress receive calls from members of from their constituents who have problems with getting government benefits and other things. That's called constituent services. Congress thrives on, that's a major issue for Congress. Congressional offices spend a lot of time and effort on constituent services because incumbent members want to take care of their voters, show that they're doing something for them. So you can imagine all the personal private data that is on these computer systems on the Hill. All could have been compromised as a result of this Juan Brothers scandal. And the Pakistani connection, where they were going in and out of Pakistan, in fact, there's a video we have out, maybe we can provide another link to it. Did you know that they were actually doing IT support out of Pakistan remotely for the Democrats? 40 members. And Luke Rosiak, who works for the Daily Caller News Foundation, reported this week, and he's been the reporter who's done much of the legwork on this story, reported that they kind of bypassed all of the background checks to let this group work. So they come in, they're hiring their family, not even performing the work for which they're being paid, just scandal on top of scandal. So this news story this week reinvigorated the whole concern. Now two of them at least are under indictment, Juan and his wife. I think there may be others. But this criminality is going uninvestigated largely by the House. They don't want to expose what went on. And when I talk about hacking, doesn't that ring a bell? Doesn't Debbie Wasserman Schultz ring a bell for you? She was head of the DNC. Remember those DNC hacks that were blamed on the Russians? Was there a connection to this Pakistani group? Was there a national security issue here? I think Congress is afraid to find out. But we're not. We have FOIAs, but it's going to be difficult to get information while these investigations supposedly are, quote, ongoing. But the House can do their own investigations. Chris Farrell did a thorough report on this. He got into more detail than I have time to get into. It's on our YouTube channel. He just did it this week as well. But he's right. You need to call your members of Congress and ask them about this Juan Brothers scandal and why aren't they investigating what went on and whether Democrats covered up the criminal misconduct of their staff while they were stealing taxpayer dollars and abusing the trust of the American people. So we're on top of everything. Well, we're not on top of everything, but we're on top of everything that you might want to be concerned about. And as always, we just don't come on and talk about it. We work on it. In the case of the Juan Brothers, Judicial Watch had to sponsor a meeting on Capitol Hill. It wasn't a formal investigative committee. We worked with Louis Gohmert, the great congressman from Texas, to get at least an informal meeting so that we could have a video coverage of it and a full discussion of this scandal on Capitol Hill. And again, that's available on our channel as well. But Judicial Watch is literally doing the work of Congress up on the Hill. on this key scandal. So we're happy to do the work, but it's outrageous we have to do it, isn't it? But we're only able to do it because of your support. And if you're not already supporting our work, you should be. I'm unembarrassed in asking for support because I think our work is important. No one else is doing it. Congress, in part, is relying on us. The administration, the deep state, is at war with our values, so we've got to fight them. And of course, the media is out to lunch. They're only interested in transparency if it advances their agenda. So Judicial Watch has stepped into the gap. So those of you who are supporters, all the things we're able to do, we do because of you. And those of you who aren't our supporters should learn more about our work. We're on the internet. You can follow us all over and support our work. Or in the least, educate yourselves about what we do and share the information that we provide to you free of charge with your fellow citizens, friends, and family. Let's get the word out. We can get this government back under control. Judicial Watch shows you we can win and we can beat City Hall more or less, but we do it with your support. Thanks again and have a great week. Tom Fitton over and out.